Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whenever I'm in this part of the galaxy, I listen to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Makes flying a little more tolerable. Don't tell Anakin.
Happy Monday, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are going to be discussing the latest Star Wars audio drama, Tempest Breaker, in this episode. But before we get to that, Jay, you want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are?
Absolutely. So we are very easily found on Instagram and Facebook at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, and we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So, as I said just a moment ago, we were talking about Tempest Breaker, which is the newest audio drama from the High Republic. It was written by Cavan Scott. It's got quite the impressive cast of voice actors and other audiobook luminaries, such as Jessica Almasy, Pete Bradbury, Jonathan Davis, Mark Thompson, and Skia Marleveld, just to name a few. Jana Lavoie is also there. We've all heard books from her. And so this is, again, it takes place in Phase 3 of the High Republic, and it furthers the adventures of Lourna Dee. So before we get into a full blown-out discussion of all the details of this, as we are known to do, we're going to have a quick non-spoiler discussion about it. Jay, what did you think about this audio drama?
Oh, such a great, fun ride. I mean, all of the audio dramas are always something that I look forward to just because it's such a great piece of entertainment to have a full cast doing the audio drama itself, and the way that the pacing and the banter and the script happens. I loved the framing device for this particular audio drama, and I absolutely love Lourna Dee. So it was just so much fun to hear this adventure, and also to get to, see how Lourna's character evolves even more. And she's definitely had quite the evolution within the High Republic from the very first time that we were introduced to her to where she ends up, with this particular adventure.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this ever since we got that teaser image of her and Marchion. It's officially Marchion, according to this audio drama. Marchion Ro were dancing that in that ballroom scene, and then when we got this, it's a fun story. About half of it is covered in the Phase 3 of the comics that Cavan Scott wrote. And it's funny, I just read through issue 10, and the end of it says the story is continued and Tempest Breaker audio drama coming out. And so
wow.
It's like, okay, there we are. And so again, it's about half the story, and then the other half is new stuff that happens here. But I got to tell you, Jessica Almasy's portrayal of Lourna Dee made this whole thing.
Oh, for sure.
She was fantastic at delivering Lourna's lines, and there's some of them that I'll try and remember here as we go through the conversation of the whole thing. But that was worth it by itself. And we got some other great characters. Tessa is in this, Elzar Mann, Avar Kriss, Keeve Trennis, Skier. Some of our favorites in the High Republic, do make these appearances, and so that helps as well. It's just fun. It moves at a great pace. The whole thing is about 6 hours and 7 minutes long, I think. And so you can get through it really in just a few days while you're doing other stuff, and it really keeps you engaged. I mean, I primarily listened to it while I was walking my dogs every day. And I was always tempted to like walk into the lap around the block just to keep going and get more of the story. But so I highly, highly recommend it.
Same. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Lourna Dee had some real ringers in this one. I would say the only drawback, and if it's, any kind of a negative criticism at all is that there were some times within the voice acting where it got a little bit heavy in
Mhm.
terms of the way that things were being portrayed. And I thought, oh gosh, okay, if I have to listen to this particular thing one more one more minute, I don't know if I can do it. But we'll get into that a little bit more. So a
Yeah,
little
and
annoying at times,
unfortunately,
but
that's a side effect of audio drama
it
because
is. It's
they,
over the
they have
top.
yeah, they have to be over top in the way they're acting because there's nothing visual for you to see.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so frequently you'll get some narration in the dialogue that would not appear on a movie or a television show or anything. And then again, to convey the point, there can be some overacting. Like for instance, Skier for me.
Yes. Yes. That
I
was
mean,
mine.
yeah,
Mhm.
he's he was always snarling, and if he was around, you knew it because he was loud, snarling, and obnoxious the entire time.
Yes,
But yeah, that is a side effect of an audio drama for sure.
indeed.
Okay, well, now we're going to go ahead and dive into some of our specifics on the story. If you've enjoyed the audio drama and want to hear what we have to say, then please stick around. And if not, if you don't want to be spoiled, then press pause in this one and come back sometime soon once you had an opportunity to enjoy it for yourself. But yeah, the story kind of summarizes as this. I mean, the events of the beginning of Phase 3 is told through the eyes of Lourna Dee for the most part. You know, you brought up the framing device here, which is she's giving an interview to Real Dario about really kind of the whole impetus for the thing is what she knows about Marchion Ro and his plans. But then it gets back into her history where she kind of took up with Avar Kriss, Keeve Trennis, and the Jedi in this attempt of hers to turn over a new leaf and find some sort of redemption. And so, again, as I said before, it covers a lot of the events that we saw in the High Republic comics that came out through Marvel that Cavan Scott wrote. And yeah, the key to this early part of this mission is they're looking for Master Skier in the Occlusion Zone and then Baron Boolean in an attempt to figure out how to defeat the Blight. And so, yeah, that's that. Um,
Mhm.
any key point I left out there you want to put into our summary?
No, I think you did a great job. I just wanted to say that, with Lourna Dee and her entire, as we were talking about with her character arc,
Mhm.
she becomes a very much of a cautionary tale in the way that, her basic upbringing and the way that she was kind of pushed into her role, if you will, in the way that she comes full circle. But I
Mhm.
did appreciate how, as you just brought up the High Republic comics, in that, we had reviewed those and that we get to see that from a different angle and a different
Mhm.
point of view at this point in the very, very beginning, which I
Yeah.
loved.
Yeah, we still haven't done issues 9 and 10, but we'll probably
Right.
getting to that sometime in the next few weeks. And I mean, I can tell you, you're right. We get most of those events, the recovery of the comb child, they find
Hmm.
Skier, and they go to the station to try and locate Boolean, and then all the things that happen there. But again, it really does focus on Lorna's actions during all of that. I
Hmm.
mean, we do get some scenes away from her where Avar Kriss is doing something or Keeve Trennis is doing something, but that stuff is covered in the comics. Whereas, and then Lorna would be off to the side, and now it's flipped in this case. We primarily follow her along, and I think that's fantastic
Oh, I do
because
too.
she ultimately finds redemption throughout
Hmm.
this story. And we'll get to what that is in just a bit. But she tags along with the Jedi this entire time and gradually becomes more and more part of their team. Did you think she was going to go through with this redemption, or did you think she was ultimately going to end up betraying everybody?
No, I honestly did think that she would go through with it because there was always that tug to her past that
Hmm.
she was so wronged and that she was always trying to find her true self. And
Hmm.
so I think that that was part of that redemption, was just the epiphany that, no one ever really made her do any of these things,
Hmm.
that she freely chose it and she owns that, and that she's willing to, to do things to make it right, in the end. And I just really appreciated that about her. But, that was one of the things that in the back of my mind, I thought, ooh, could she potentially? I always had faith in her that she would, but you never know with some of these types of stories, because you hope that they go a certain way, or you think that they're going to go a certain way, and then they just rip that right out from underneath you and they
Mhm.
completely surprise you. So yeah, so that was my take on it though. I thought that she would, but there was that little piece of me that thought maybe the authors would go a different route. But what do you think?
Well, for a while there was a parallel to what happened in Tempest Runner, the first audio drama that she starred in. Whereas, she was a prisoner and she was basically working towards making amends and getting into less trouble while she was a prisoner and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And then the warden, whose name escapes me at the moment, it kind of comes out that his interest in helping her reform was driven from his own interest to try and like change just one prisoner before he succumbed to the disease he had.
Mhm.
And when
Mhm.
that came out to Lourna, she's like, "You're basically just using me. This wasn't about me. This was about you this entire time." And then so she, ended up with another ship. She again fell into her near do well ways. And then she'd been making all this progress here in Tempest Breaker, only for them to get to Coruscant. And Avar Kriss places them all under arrest, including Keeve Trennis and
Yeah.
Tarek and Sarah and Skier, and Lourna Dee and Quinn. And then they take Boolean from them and they run off to conduct some tests and try and put his formula into work. And she's like, "What is this? Do you know who I am? How can you lock me out?" And
Mhm.
she very nearly, she does. She steals the ship that they had and she starts to fly off on her own. Just the way, it's like, this wasn't about me at any point, was it? It was all about you, Jedi. And she's like cursing the Jedi the entire way. You Jedi never change. And why did I think you would? And then as she's leaving Coruscant, the Gaze Electric shows up. And then she has second thoughts and she goes back down to the planet to intercept Marchion. And, then Quinn, who is her love interest,
Mhm.
gets attacked by Marchion and suffers a pretty bad wound. And she ultimately then gets back on that course. But yeah, there was for a moment where I was like, oh, she's leaving the planet. And I was like, here we go
Yeah.
again. And so I was prepared for her to backslide into her old habits again,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
would have been
It
tragic because it
Yeah.
just followed that whole climactic encounter with Marchion at that ball. I can't remember the name of the planet that they were on, but it was in the inclusion zone under the guise of the people of that planet were paying homage to Marchion Ro and the Nihil, and they needed to get the coordinates of wherever Boolean had gone. So they all showed up there and, they had that encounter.
Right, which is such a fantastic sequence that
Hmm.
I know we're gonna talk about here in just a second. But, I think for Lorna too, and as far as the Jedi with especially with Keeve, I mean, Lorna and Keeve ended up working together pretty closely. And, there was definitely a lot more of an involvement with those people than what Lorna had with that warden. And so there was, I think a deeper relationship. And I think that she was kind of banking on that.
Hmm.
So at the same time, though, I could see where, you're saying that she felt even more betrayed, perhaps because she had invested a little bit more into those relationships and she felt that they invested more into her as
Hmm.
well. And I'm not sure how I mean, not to say I'm kind of jumping here, but not to say that she was necessarily out of character, but did you get a different Avar Kriss feel in this audio drama than what we've had in some of the other media and print things that we've gotten as far as Avar's character is concerned?
I thought it was similar to the possessed Avar Kriss when she was trying to track down Lourna Dee when she thought Lourna was the Eye of the Nile.
Yes. Okay.
But
Mhm.
I thought through Temptation of the Force that Tessa Gratton had written that she'd come around on a whole bunch
Yes.
of things. And so for her to lose it with Keeve, when Keeve came back to Coruscant, I was like, she backslid like in a major way uh,
Mhm.
from Temptation of the Force. And so I was a little concerned about that. But by the end of this audio drama, she'd kind of collected herself and made amends and apologized to Keeve to Keeve Trennis for that.
Right, right. Yeah, I felt that way too. And I don't know, there's some inconsistency overall, I think, to Avar's portrayal as a character. And I understand that the different storylines drive that
Mm-hmm.
in ways, but then there's also some really, I don't know, this one just left me kind of feeling a little bit like she like you said, she came around, but it didn't feel like that same Avar.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a function of the fact that so many different people are writing stuff for the High Republic at the same time.
Mhm.
That occasionally you're going to get some sort of inconsistency there. But it did stick out to me after again we saw the gains she made in Temptation of the Force 2 to
Right.
lose it and to accuse Keeve of so many things when she got back. Speaking of Keeve, and then I want to talk about the encounter with Marchion Ro at the ball. Uh, Very interesting. Her in this, she's kind of the Jedi that's making everything go throughout this story, and she is in the comics, and clearly one of Cavan Scott's favorite characters. The way he
Oh
handles her,
yeah.
but there's the one point where she's talking to Avar, and she's voicing this frustration that will come up again during the Clone Wars, which is, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We've lost our way. I've been searching for the light in not so many words out there somewhere, and I don't recognize we've come and the decisions we're making here, which is pretty telling. I mean, there is a Master Trennis that ends up being one of the lost 20 that we find about during the prequel era, during the Clone Wars, and a lot of
Mhm.
people speculated that it is this Master Trennis that eventually leaves. And I don't know, the way she's talking there seems awfully reminiscent of other people. Vernestra Rowe got frustrated with the Order and left for a little bit before coming back. So, I mean, is this whole encounter of the Nile is what's going to drive Keeve out of the Jedi?
Right. Yeah, I thought about that too. And kind of going back to what we were saying with Avar Kriss, I do think that Keeve Trennis has definitely been one of the most consistent characters
Mm-hmm.
throughout the High Republic, from our very first encounter with her as being this sort of unsure Jedi that was having these inner monologue moments, and but yet being very unsure about certain things and reprimanding herself. And she's still reprimanding herself, in terms of, what am I doing? What are we doing as Jedi, as you were pointing out? And just always having that little bit of a check and balance within herself. And I think that that's just so true to her character throughout this entire audio drama as well. And then to come to find out at the end that she becomes the light of the Jedi, and she's, now going to have this marshal title that she gets to have, falling into Avar's, footsteps in that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I almost feel like that kind of ignores what Keeve was just talking about,
Mhm.
when it comes down to, because she makes the point of saying that, when they were, prior to this encounter with the Nile, when they were training at the temple, they basically learned that if you pull your lightsaber out, that ends any dispute that you're in.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
everyone, that pretty much ends, and that's not the case anymore. When they pull out their lightsabers, they have to use them,
Mhm.
and that's not what they're used to. And so, yeah, I appreciate what Avar said to Keeve, and she's not wrong. I mean, Keeve has been out there on the forefront doing what the Force calls the Jedi to do. When
Right.
other Jedi have kind of lost their way in that regards, so again, it's history repeat itself when we get to the Clone Wars there, and then that I don't know that frustration really gets addressed. Instead, it's almost doubled down upon. Yeah, so you're so good at doing what you talked about that we're going to make you do more of the thing that you're concerned about. That putting you in
Right.
charge of a defense force to fight the Nile.
Right.
So we'll see
And
what
if she
happens there.
does, yeah, and if she does become one of the last 20, maybe this is the catalyst that really makes that happen. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
All right. Well, we've talked all around it. Let's get to the encounter between Lourna and Marchion Ro. Again, I
Yes.
wish I'd written down the name of the planet, but they're there because they need to find where Muglin, who is a former associate of Lourna Dee and Quinn's, has taken Boolean and Skier. And it turns out she had a bounty from Marchion Ro to retrieve them, because Marchion was concerned that Boolean was betraying him and not following through on his research with the Blight. And so they go to this planet where they know Muglin would have been. They've got some clues, and they get there and they find out that there is this reception happening for Marchion Ro, and there's homage being paid to him in the Nihil. Great line as they're getting ready to head there. Lourna, since it's a formal occasion, asks, Marshal Kriss, how do you look in a ball gown? Ravishing, I imagine. The way she says it and just teases her about it is it was just poking fun at her. And then, they get to the planet, and Lourna and Quinn are talking about how the Jedi look in their dresses. And Quinn's going, yeah, they do look good. And Lourna's response, like, put your tongue back in your mouth. She just can throw out those lines.
Oh my gosh. I
Cavan,
love it.
Yeah, wrote some great dialogue for her. But Marchion recognizes Quinn and moves in on her. And then Lourna intercedes as a distraction. And the two of them are dancing in the middle of the ballroom floor, having this very dangerous conversation. And I mean, it was just so incredibly well done. The barbs that they're trading, the truths that they were spitting back and forth at each other. I mean, this is the highlight of the book. I can see why someone was inspired to make a painting of this whole thing.
Yes, and I was just going to say, and now we know where that illustration came from. And yeah, you're absolutely spot on with that, because the way that Lourna interacts with Marchion is in the way that only Lourna can, because everyone else that comes into just even close orbit with Marchion is so incredibly intimidated by him, bows down to him, or in some way, shape, or form does anything that just honors him, whereas Lourna just gives it right back to him. And you could just tell even that Quinn was out of her league, because she was stammering over her words and, not knowing what to say, and, everything with that. And then Lourna comes right in and just with the utmost of confidence, and then, oh my gosh, ends up attacking him. Did you think she was going to kill him right then and there?
Oh, I didn't think she was
Right
going to
there.
kill him, but I knew she was going to attack him in some fashion there.
Yeah.
But the way she sets that whole thing up, she tells Marchion that, you're out of your element. For this entire time you've been in the shadows, pulling the strings from a distance where you're safe. And now you've reached the top, and it's not what you thought it would be. And there's nowhere left to go with this. And so you're lashing out. You're not doing safe anymore. And then she nails it. She says, well, she talks about herself. And as you talked about earlier, she blamed everyone else for what has happened to her in the galaxy. She shouts her name to the galaxy in defiance the entire. She names her ships after herself to spread her name, to spread her reputation. But it's not getting her that respect. It's not getting back any of the wrongs that were done to her. And then she realizes that, as you said, all these things have happened to her, but that didn't make her make the decisions that she's made. She's ultimately responsible for that. And she then looks at Mark and says, and right now, I can tell you just want to tear out my throat, but you can't, because you're in the spotlight. But I'm not under those restrictions. And so she goes for his throat. I wasn't sure exactly where she bit him, but yeah, I was assuming she was aiming for the neck. But if you look at the painting, she's considerably shorter than he is. So that would have been a reach.
Yeah, for sure. And I have to admit, I listened to that entire sequence like 3 times from beginning to end, because the first time I listened to it, I was busy doing some other things. So I felt like I didn't give it the attention that it deserved, because all of a sudden, I'm listening to them talking and it's kind of sinking in. But then chaos ensues. So I was like, wait, I have to go back and listen to this again. And so then I went back and listened to it a 3rd time, just because that whole encounter was just so delicious, and just the way that it ended up. And, and then again, the chaos that ensues afterwards is just top notch. I mean, that was such an entertaining part. Like you said, it was the highlight of the entire audio drama. I will agree.
Yeah. What did you think about in that, at that same time that was going on, Avar and Keeve were trying to get the coordinates of where Muglin had taken Boolean, and
Mhm.
so they're trying to find the Shi'ar, I think is what the name of the guards for
Mhm.
Marchion are called,
Mhm.
and one of them suffers what's a fatal injury, and Avar starts using mind tricks on him.
Yeah.
That is, tell me what you want to know, and then I'll help you like not suffer anymore.
Mhm.
We were already talking about Avar kind of being not herself or kind of backsliding from where we saw her in Temptation of the Force. That kind of made me a little uneasy. The mind tricks about, I'll ease your suffering if you tell me what I need to know there.
Right? No, I totally agree. But to answer your first question, I thought it was nicely paralleled.
Hmm.
As they were telling these stories and they were going along the same path at the same time, but yet you were not confused whatsoever as to what scene you were thinking about when you were listening to this. But no, I'm
Hmm.
with you with the way that Avar was doing that because as you said, she was saying, "Well, I'm not going to kill you and I will ease your suffering if you do this." That's a little yeah, not really the Jedi way. I mean, they said that quite a few times in this audio drama. It's not the Jedi way or this is the Jedi way, and that
Hmm.
just didn't seem very Jedi way-ish.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, I was concerned for her
Yeah.
when I heard all of that. And of course, Key had taken a head injury at the time. And
Yeah.
then things were compounded by the Nameless being on the grounds.
Mhm.
At that one point, one gets close to Avar and she's having those hallucinations about like everyone rejecting her uh,
Mhm.
in some form or another, saying that this is what she deserves, and she's not needed anymore. She's made too many mistakes, and so she fights through all of that. Skier has not there, but he has a similar run in at one point where Boolean is working on him, and because Skier had risked his own life and safety to save Boolean from the Nameless, Boolean then cures his McGrack syndrome
Right.
and Skier regains his connection to the Force. I didn't see that coming at all.
No, I didn't either. And, real quick to backtrack too, I did appreciate how they brought in Pratri Veeder back
Mhm,
into kind of the storyline, as sort of a vehicle for Avar's hallucinations. I thought that was a nice touch. But yeah, the whole McGrack syndrome thing, I didn't see that coming either. And especially from such an unexpected source
mhm,
in Boolean. But I mean, then again, you think about all of the things that he had done for Marchion by providing all of the research that he did for him, that as an alchemist, it's, kind of I guess it fits,
mhm.
that he was able to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we got a lot more of Bullen's history here.
Oh, yeah.
We'd already known that he was the character that we met in Phase 2, so 100
Mhm.
years prior to this story, and then he was in the path of the open hand. What we didn't know is that he never really let go of those
He
beliefs, and so when, on Dalna, when there had been the Night of a Thousand Tears or whatever it was that they called it, and there was the flooding that pretty much killed off a big chunk of the Force cult. The Jedi had shown up, and there was that big fight that happened, and then Marchion Ro left on the Gaze Electric and basically took over the whole cult at that point. Boolean was left behind, and he started experimenting in his father's lab, and then only went to the surface once he kind of exhausted everything there. But he still clung to this belief that the Force will be free. And so while he was working on a cure for the blight, as Marchion wanted, he hid a virus in it that would
Yeah,
sever anyone's that was exposed to it their connection to the Force. The flaw with it is that without the Force there is no life. And so
exactly.
the intent was to prevent the Jedi from using the Force so the Force would be free, but it would kill not just them, but anybody else. It's like it is a airborne version of the blight when it comes down to it, and that's not what Marchion wanted at all, because he'd promised a cure to the galaxy as a way of manipulating everything.
Right, right. I mean, this is like the ultimate throwing out the baby with the bathwater kind of
Mhm,
thing.
mhm,
But, for Bullen, how I don't know if it was ingenious of him or if it was just incredibly naive that he was working almost, behind the scenes against Marchion to satisfy his own, agenda in terms of what he wanted for
Mhm.
the galaxy. And, that's a very large risk for him to take because, he can sit there and justify it all he wants as far as, the force will be free and these are gifts freely given and, those types of things. But if Markian would have found out his true intentions, it definitely would have ended very badly for him.
Yeah, Marchion flew all the way to Coruscant to try and get him after he
Yeah,
found out, and it was only because Lourna and Quinn interceded that he wasn't able to do anything about it. I mean,
exactly.
he was furious. And so, and then that great fight that he and Lourna had there at the end where she crashes a crane on top of him so that he can't get away for a little while. But yeah, that was, I liked Boolean's story because it was not what I expected, but it made perfect sense
Mhm.
when we were told that. And because for so much of the time, he's just portrayed as the mad scientist,
Right.
and now we find, and he technically still is a mad scientist,
He
but
truly is. Yes,
yeah,
truly.
but he has a purpose that, you understand, kind of like you can understand what Thanos was doing in Avengers, right?
Right.
It's, you don't necessarily agree with it, you understand the aim, but okay, he's not just out there manipulating things for the sake of making monsters, with genetic engineering.
Mhm. Mhm. He actually has a method to the madness, even
Yeah,
if it's just his own method.
right. So the story ends with Lorna getting her redemption. She staved off Marchion for a while. They were able to prevent this virus that was hidden in the cure for the blight from being used anywhere. She was able to retrieve, they needed Boolean so they could get to his research so they could start working on this cure for the blight, but I'm guessing none of that is going to be useful anymore. But the Republic honors their agreement and they give her a bounty hunter's license. And she sets up a bounty hunters guild. Quinn is the captain of a ship, which Lauren is not named after herself. She's encouraging Quinn to name it after herself. And she wants to donate half of her reward to a relief effort for Dalna. And she's also looking to give others the same second chance that she got here.
Mhm.
Which I gotta tell you, that was way more than I was expecting for her redemption story. How far she went in all this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, they even joked about how, "Oh, she says, "It's a tax break," and they're like, "You pay taxes?" And she's like, "Oh,
I hear that's what
kind
you
of a
do.
thing. I hear that's what you do. Exactly. Well, I mean, realistically, though, Kiev was in her coma for what was it, 3 months or 3 weeks? Was
Thought
it
it was like
3
a
weeks
month
or
or
three
something. I can't
months?
remember.
Was
Yeah.
it 1 month? But still, I
Yeah.
mean, that's I mean, it's not a ton of time, but it's quite a long time to have elapsed
Hmm.
after all of the events had taken place and, for things to kind of start progressing forward in Lorna's new life, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, again, Lorna was so close to abandoning all of this. She was so close to getting the redemption. She was so close to getting her pardon. And then she started to take off from Coruscant. But Scoot, Tay Sarek's
Mhm.
droid was with her and was kind of the angel over her shoulder, kind of
Yeah.
annoying her and stalling her long enough that, she decided she had to make a move once Marchion showed up at Coruscant and the Gaze Electric there. Uh, I don't know. I did not expect things to turn out that well for her. And we've been teased with a lot more High Republic comics coming after the beginning of the year. And we've got her on the cover with like Jedi falling at her feet. So
Mm.
I'm hoping there isn't another fall in her future and that's just, a ruse for something, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too because Lorna is kind of taken on almost like a Hondo Onaka-esque sort
Yeah.
of character arc,
Hmm.
in that way. And so I would love to see her continue to still be kind of the scoundrel, but also, the Jedi kind of keep her in the back pocket kind of thing. And they know that they can rely on her. And there's, if not trust, there's a connection and a mutual respect there.
Yeah. And that series is called coming up next year is The Fear of the Jedi, also
Okay.
written by Cavan Scott.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
yeah, that'll be interesting to see. Now there is a cover where she is seemingly charging into battle with a bunch of Jedi, including Skier, Terseric, Kelnaka, Master Orbalin, and Keeve Trennis. So we'll have to
Okay.
keep an eye on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, for
All
sure.
right. Well, I think we've covered most of this. Do you have any other final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Well, just a couple quick hits. I mean, I really love Tesseric in this, and he's
Mhm.
just as, wonderful in this audio drama as I imagined him, being within the comics and just his evolution and that kind of thing. He reminds me kind of as of the High Republic Astarion, from
Sure.
from Baldur's Gate in his characterization. So that was a lot of fun. And, just overall, just heck of a fun audio drama, and definitely very much recommend to anyone that likes High Republic things, and especially Lourna Dee.
Yeah. Cavan Scott has been one of those consistently good writers for the High Republic. Can't think of anything that I haven't enjoyed that he's written for it so far.
I would agree.
Okay. Well, then that'll do it for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of Tempest Breaker, which, by the way, was the name of Lorna's Bounty Hunters Guild. Tempest
Yes.
Breakers. I guess we should have mentioned that.
The last word in the whole audio drama. They're the Tempest Breakers. Love it.
hmm But if you've enjoyed this, then please consider subscribing to the podcast. If you haven't done so already, we're pretty much available on all the podcatchers. And if we're not on one that you particularly enjoy, please let us know on one of our various social media contacts, which we'll tell you about here in a second. And we'll work towards getting that done. Also, rate, subscribe, like whatever it is that your podcatcher does that helps the others find the show and helps us get noticed. And we appreciate that. If you want to find the episodes of the show that are beyond what's available on your podcatcher, because most of them only support 1 to 300 episodes, you can find the entire catalog of our previous 823 over at richersapp.com, as well as all the other great shows on the network, including Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Case Files, Animaniacast, Brews and Blasters, Dorklair, Doomcast, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, Superhero Suite, and Warp Trails. Jay, in case anyone wants to get in touch with us, you want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we are located on the internet.
Sure. And we'd love to hear from anyone who has listened to Tempest Breaker, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So you can do that on Instagram and Facebook at Podcast Stardust. And we do have some Pinterest boards, and you can also connect with us on both of our YouTube outlets. So we are on the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So hit up both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And we also have a Discord room, which is part of the Wretches Up Discord server. So all the shows that Dennis just was running down that are over there on Wretches Up also have their own rooms as well. So if you'd like to get in on that, you can just hit up that link in our show notes. And another way that you can support the show is by buying something from our TeePublic store. So we have 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of things, from apparel to home goods and everything in between. And once again, that link is in our show notes.
Okay. You want to remind everybody what you've got going on in cosplay?
Sure. So you can always find me on my Instagram, which is at the Lourna Dee. No, I'm kidding. It's at j.snips cosplay. And so right now you can find me always as Ahsoka, Hera, the Fourth Sister, my original concept Mandalorian, as well as some other fun things as well. And so, with the holidays here, we've been having a lot of fun with some winter Ahsoka and some other Christmassy themed kinds of things. So make sure you check out my feed, the reels, and all of the fun things on my stories at j.snips cosplay.
All right. So upcoming on the show on Wednesday, we are celebrating Christmas with a fun Star Wars character holiday gift exchange. It's kind of a tradition here on this podcast for the holiday season, and we're continuing it this year. And then on Friday, we'll be getting into the next episode of Skeleton Crew. So make sure you come back for that. With that said, thanks for listening to episode 824 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.